2 Timothy chapter 2 verse 15. Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. What is it that we are to study unto according to this verse? To be approved unto God. What does our studying unto this godliness involve? It directly involves the rightly dividing of the word of truth. The word of truth here is linked undoubtedly to the form of sound words that is referenced in chapter 1 of this same epistle, representing the reception of truth and doctrine given by revelation to the Apostle Paul. The word of truth is contained in the form of sound words. And this phrase, the form of sound words, demonstrates that a literal, formal equivalence translation of the scriptures following the correct textual basis, honouring the words of God, is to be that which we are to study and rightly divide in order to show ourselves approved unto God. The King James Version in the English tongue, not paraphrases or thought-for-thought translation processes such as is utilised within the New International Version. We see also in chapter 3 of 2 Timothy that the Old Testament scriptures, alongside apostolic doctrine, are included within this phrase, the word of truth, equipping and perfecting the man of God sufficiently. So, labouring in the word of truth is a crucial aspect of our studying to show ourselves approved unto God. And in studying the word of truth, we are to rightly divide it. As Israel's land was divided amongst the tribes with specific portions appertaining to each tribe, so must we rightly divide the word of truth so as to ensure that specific texts of scripture are apportioned and ascribed to the right people, time frame, prophetic events, dispensations, and so on. Yes, all scripture is for us and for our learning, but certain promises, prophecies, covenants, laws and commands have their direct application to specific times, groups, events and dispensations. The tithing laws serve as a good example, contained in scripture for our learning and instruction, yet having their direct application for Israel under the Old Covenant. Often, however, the laws on tithing are eagerly wrested from their context and applied to the church today by unlearned and unscrupulous leaders seeking often to raise funds for their projects by unjustly exacting 10% of the income of those attending their churches. Notice too, from the text under our consideration, that the man of God is to be approved rather than ashamed as a workman within the church of God, and that this being approved is unto God, not man. Looking good before men and seeking their approval and plaudits should never be a minister's goal or desire in his study of the word and the application thereof. A minister's approval is to be of God, in accordance with his will and word. We have a swarm of ministers in the UK today whose accreditation, approval and sanction is from a body of men, such as a church council, university, college or fraternity, but who clearly lack the approval of God, being oftentimes heretics, compromisers, Calvinists, degenerates, sodomites and the like. And also women who God in his word has not approved as holding authority over the main body of a local church assembly. Furthermore, we see the man of God, in his study of the word of truth, fulfilling the role of a workman, and earlier in the chapter, a good soldier of Jesus Christ, two titles and roles which demonstrate the reality of life for the man of God, potentially involving the enduring of hardness, encountering trouble, being imprisoned, suffering rejection, persecution and affliction, all such being described within the epistle of 2 Timothy as a whole. No less than 22 times in the New Testament do we see the word labour or labouring attached to Christian ministry, and equipping for such service and work demands an intimate knowledge of the word of truth. The most numerically popular pulpits in the UK today are filled with pastors who have little knowledge both of the word of truth and the hardship and labour of true pastoral care. Linked to what the man of God is to study, the word of truth, is that which he is not to study, profane and vain babblings, which he is to shun, and which increase unto more ungodliness. Such profane and vain babblings are a word of cancer, overthrowing the faith of persons. False doctrine has destructive consequences, and in studying and rightly dividing the word of truth, the man of God is equipping himself to withstand and shun profane and vain babblings, and thus protect those under his care. An aversion to studying the word of truth, is irresponsible for the man of God, as he potentially leaves himself unprepared for the assaults made upon those souls over which he has been entrusted. And it is no wonder that modern perversions of the Bible, such as the New International Version, pervert 2 Timothy 2:15 so as to discourage the man of God from his studious labour. The diabolical New International Version rendering the verse as follows: "Do your best to present yourself to God as one approved, a worker who does not need to be ashamed and who correctly handles the word of truth." Where is study here? Where is a studious approach to godliness in this New International Version text? The NIV's "do your best" is a subjective and weakened rendering by translators who have little regard for the form of sound words, changing the biblical text habitually and mercilessly to fit their own corrupt bias. It is no wonder that they omit the concept of study here, as their NIV translation in general disrupts the possibility of true scriptural study, a distorting and mutilating of the text of Scripture comprising their philosophical translational basis. Within 2 Timothy, we see the credentials laid out concerning the development of the man of God, particularly within a time of spiritual departure and apostasy. And the studying and rightly dividing of the word of truth is a key part of this preparation. It is worth surveying here some other characteristics found within 2 Timothy unto which the man of God is to aspire. The man of God is to be a man of unfeigned faith. He is to have a genuine gifting of God. He is to be ready to suffer for the gospel, to pass on apostolic truth to faithful men so they in turn may teach others. His motivation of labour is toward the sheep, not his own aggrandisement. He is to regulate who he fellowships with. He is to be able to teach and preach. He is a servant, and he is to be fully acquainted with scriptural truth and engage in the work of an evangelist. Such characteristics serve to protect those under the care of such a minister and servant of Christ, and cast away the possibility of compromise and cowardice within the leadership role. It is evident that we see within 2 Timothy as a major theme the means of the preservation of truth in a time of apostasy, with the exhortation to observe the following charges in a day of spiritual decline: to cleave to the word of truth and rightly divide it, to preach that word, to hold firmly to a faithful and literal translation of that word, warring and fighting for the faith, our weapons not being carnal but spiritual, the entrusting of truth to faithful men for its preservation and spread, the firm rejection of error, distancing ourselves from carnality and compromised churches, and keeping ourselves morally pure. Such directives from God within the epistle of 2 Timothy are a faithful preservative to keep us unspotted from the sin, error and compromise so prevalent within churches in a time of apostasy as today. My friends, let us study and apply ourselves diligently unto becoming approved unto God, for Christ's sake and his body, the church, as well as for the unsaved.